Hello everyone, today I will be doing a tutorial for Acheron the Galaxy Ranger for newcomers, veteran players, casual players, and endgame or zero cyclers. Here in the Team Comp section, we can use Fire Trailblazer, Gneifen, Pella, and Acheron as a beginner-friendly comp if you don't have any other Nihility characters for your account. Another comp is where you replace Gneifen with Sampo and use the Fermata Light Cone for your Acheron to boost her damage on wind shear afflicted enemies. If you have access to Black Swan, you could opt for her instead of Sampo and still use Fermata or Goodnight Sleep Well at S5. In place of Black Swan, you could also use Silver Wolf as a debuffer, since she herself can inflict a lot of debuffs on her own. This means Acheron can have her ult ready in no time because of the amount of debuffs she can inflict. Silver Wolf is like Pella also have Defense Shred on her kit and will help decrease enemy defense for more damage. The only difference is that Pella is AoE while Silver Wolf is for single target only. If you have Acheron's E2 Eidolon, you could opt for a Harmony character like Sparkle. Sparkle can sometimes be greater than a double Nihility comp since her damage boosting is high. In an Acheron comp, you could opt for Welt as a sustain as long as your Welt is fast enough to slow the enemies down. Because of Welt's ability to imprison and slow enemies, you could potentially use him in a zero cycle comp in Memory of Chaos.
Another sustain is Jeopard, where he can inflict a freeze debuff on his skill and also giving a large amount of shield for your allies. Note that every preservation needs to use the Trend of the Universal Market Light Cone to inflict an extra debuff on the enemies when your preservation character gets hit. Next is Fu Xuan, which is also good for buffing your Acheron's crit rate and also sustaining the whole team on her own. You still need to use the Trend Light Cone on her to maximize the debuffs you gain for Acheron. In the Light Cone section, her best in slot, of course, is her signature Light Cone, which increases her ult damage and boost crit damage. It also inflicts a debuff on the enemy every time you hit them. Another Light Cone good for Acheron is Incessant Rain, which gives 12% crit rate when the enemies have 3 or more debuffs and also inflicts a debuff that increases damage every time you use your basic attack, skill, or ultimate. Another Light Cone is Fermata, which is best paired with DOT character like Black Swan, Kafka, Sampo, and maybe Serval, which inflicts shock and wind shear, because Fermata increases the wearer's damage if the enemy is inflicted by wind shear or shock. Then Resolution shines as Pearls of Sweat, which has a chance of inflicting Ensnared, which decreases the enemy defense, which can help you deal more damage. Then her best free-to-play option is Goodnight Sleep Well, which increases your damage for every debuff the enemy have that stacks up to 3 times. Another is In the Name of the World, which increases damage on debuffed enemies and increases attack for the wearer's skill. Another option on Light Cones is Patience is All You Need, which increases damage and boosts your speed every time you launch an attack, stacking up to 3 times. In the Trace section, I recommend you to level up your ult first, then talent, then skill. You can leave your basic attack at level 1 since most of your damage doesn't come from it anyways. The A2 or Ascension 2 Trace of Acheron lets you start the battle with 5 stacks of Slash Dreams, and when Slash Dream stacks exceed its upper limit, gains 1 point of Quadrivalent Ascendance that has a cap of 3 which converts to Slash Dreams after you use your ult. Then her A4 Trace, which increases damage dealt by your basic attack, skill, and ultimate, if you have 1 or 2 Nihility characters except for Acheron herself on the team. Then her A6 Trace, which increases her ult's damage for each 3 stacks of Crimson Knot consumed by her ult, and when the final Slash or Stygian Resurge triggers, it will deal 6 additional damage to a single enemy, and is also considered as ult damage. Then in the Relic section, I recommend using the 4-piece Pioneer set, which increase the damage dealt to debuff enemies and also increase crit rate and deals more crit damage if the enemies have 2 or 3 debuffs. You could also use the Sizzling Thunder set, which increases lightning damage and increases attack whenever you use your skill. Then on planar sets, I recommend using 2-piece Izumo, which increases attack and increase crit rate whenever you have an ally of the same path. You could also use Inert Salsato, which increases crit rate. And when your crit rate is 50% or more, you deal more damage on your ult and follow-up attacks. Then on your main stats, I recommend having a crit rate or damage body, an attack or speed boots, an attack or lightning orb, then an attack rope. Then in the Eidolon section, her E1 increases your crit rate on debuffed enemies. Then her E2, which decreases the amount of Nihility required on your A4 Trace, and also gains 1 stack of Slash Dreams each time Acheron's turn starts.
Then her E4, which inflict vulnerability to ultimate damage, which increases damage taken by enemies on your ultimate. Then lastly her E6 will give you more all-type resistance penetration and considers you basic attack and skill as ultimate damage, which also reduce enemy weakness regardless of its type.